HqO is looking to disrupt the real estate industry as the Experience platform recently collected over $50 million in Series D funding. As real estate continues to evolve from the pandemic shift in terms of where, how, and when people work, HqO tracking sentiment and engagement analysis of work environments. Here to break down the latest in the real estate experience economy, we have HqO CEO Chase Garabarino. Chase, thanks for being here. I have to start with this, Chase. I have to admit, I was looking over your press materials and trying to figure out exactly what you guys do in terms of how you track all this information. Can you just give us like the 30-second summary of how HqO sort of manages these real estate experiences?
Yeah. Hi, Julie. Thanks for having me on. The simple way to put it is you have an app for your bank. Oftentimes you have an app for your car, depending on what kind of car you have. Most of our daily workflows happen through our phone. And when you think about going to a commercial property, whether it is an office tower, a multifamily building, there are lots of different things that you need to do with that property that previously had not been happening through an app. We put all of that into one place in an application. So obviously we have a very tight relationship between the property and the end user of the property. So we're able to gather an awful lot of information about how people use buildings and how they feel about it.
So what is some of that stuff? How often people are in the office? Is it also like HVAC? Like, are we talking everything here? What kind of data are you collecting?
Yeah, you think about the day in the life you might have at a property. So everything from even before you get there, we aggregate public transit data. If it helps you get through your commute, we help digitize your key card. We help you get into the property. We'll integrate with ground level retail or amenities so that people can order services or purchase things. In certain instances, you mentioned HVAC, we will connect to smart building systems as well. So we're really trying to bundle kind of all of these disparate experiences that you might have at a property into one platform.
So Chase, you have some unique insight then into property managers, landlords. I'm just interested in what they're telling you right now. How is business for them?
Yeah, and I think you've probably talked about this a little bit. I've seen it on Yahoo Finance, which really it's a tale of two cities, pun intended, with regards to commercial real estate. You're seeing the flight to quality in the office sector, and the question around workspace in particular is not whether people necessarily want to work in person. I think they're just tired of working in product that's not particularly good. So when you have a global event like the pandemic that no one really could have predicted or prepared for, everyone goes home and they personalize their workspace to them. So the consumer expectations in terms of, if I'm going to spend half an hour, however long your commute is, in terms of the environment that I'm going back to, they're just significantly higher. So I think there's a lot of work to be done in terms of, the current stock of product meeting the new consumer expectations. But if you meet those expectations, we're seeing, particularly in New York, where you all sit, significantly higher rental rates. People value really good space. So, we certainly have to work our way through the rate cycle. It's going to be painful in terms of just how quickly the cost of capital has gone up on all these folks who have adjustable rates. But I think that's why, where we sit, it's so much more important. A number of our landlords are saying, when they're going to negotiate with their lenders, they won't renegotiate beyond 1 year. And the big thing, if I'm a lender, that I want to know is, are the people at the building actually happy? The demand side of the equation has significantly more leverage than they did before. You used to have an office because it was the cost of doing business, and that's no longer the case. So I think, it's going to be painful in the short term, but it's going to make commercial real estate significantly more customer oriented, which I think will be a win for everyone.
Chase, what is the biggest factor in whether or not the tenant is happy at this point?
Yeah, I think, the part of the problem is that a lot of folks are looking for a silver bullet, right? And I think the problem that commercial real estate has to kind of grapple with, that almost every other industry has tackled. Right before this, I was watching the Taylor Swift segment that you all had on. If you remember what music went through, we used to have this kind of analog distribution method where you would buy, bundles of music, i.e. an album, and distribution was tightly controlled, and the record labels kind of owned the supply. And then the internet came along, and consumers had all sorts of choice and freedom. And the music industry had to kind of take a hit, and then ultimately they got into streaming, and they've started to become much more granular around individual preferences. And commercial real estate is going through the exact same thing. We all have different requirements for what we need out of a physical space, and they need to be much more data driven in terms of the types of amenities and things that are needed. You can no longer just look at the building across the street and say, great, it worked for them, we're going to copy it. The people that work at the companies in your building probably have different requirements than just being able to carbon copy every other property. So there is no kind of one amenity that's a silver bullet. It's significantly becoming about data-driven insights around kind of the consumer as the customer.
Well, it's interesting, Chase, that you guys just completed this funding round, because I think the sort of conventional wisdom is that everything having to do with office right now is not doing well. And yet here you are out raising money. So what do you think, besides just that you guys are great or whatever,
why did people give us money?
What do you think? Yeah, I mean, what do you think that reflects something not just about your company, but maybe something that we don't quite realize about what's going on with the office market?
Yeah, I think, look, when you zoom out, there's two pieces of your question, which I think is a very good one, which is when you zoom out with regards to the trends of how people use buildings in cities, and we don't just look a couple decades back, but we go even further. Like, first and foremost, economic progress, across the history of humanity has always clustered. So in terms of, our great cities, will they face some pain over the next few years? Yeah, probably. But at the end of the day, New York is the epicenter of finance, fashion, media. Silicon Valley exists for a reason. The auto revolution happened in Detroit. You can, I won't regale you with all of them, but industrial revolution was clustered, all of these things. So there's inherently benefit to, people working together in person. The building stock and our infrastructure needs to adapt and grow as work adapts and grows. So I think people who are a little bit more long-term oriented see that, frankly, the pain that's in the market is what's creating the opportunity for HqO. And then when you think about kind of the venture investment side of this, the best investments tend not to be the ones that are the most obvious, I would say. When Google came about, there were a significant amount of search engines. Facebook was not the first social network. I think when people heard the first pitch for Airbnb, it was like, wait, a stranger is going to stay on my couch, right? So, I think when you're a venture investor, you kind of have to be a little contrarian to a degree. And I think, where we sit with regards to the distress in commercial real estate, it's an industry that really hasn't changed for a very long time. And because there is pain in the market, we're finally starting to see that change and transformation is happening. So the opportunity is now.
Interesting stuff. Chase, thanks so much. Chase Garabarino of HqO. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.